Hey everyone, what's going on? This is Jacob Westendorf here with Pulse of the Pack and Packer Report. I am here with a colleague of mine, Jake Stack. Jacob Morley is here to talk Green Bay Packers and Oakland Raiders. Jacob, this is a first for us, so no NDSU football for you today. So we got a little bit of time to talk some Packers. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, I mean NDSU plays at 2:30. They're playing a pretty weak opponent, so we got time to do this today. I'm excited though, man. This is cool. This is neat for people to be able to kind of put a name with a face. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this as well. So something NDSU in the past has been a powerhouse. Carson Wentz, Easton Stick, John Crockett might be a name some people remember from the
Yeah.
Packers world. I actually just watched a highlight of the Miracle in Motown today while I was on the treadmill and saw him running for
Oh
a
yeah.
couple bursts up the middle. So I think,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, John Crockett got drafted in the XFL the other day. I could be wrong, but uh,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that if he is. I know he was in Canada as that's the most recent stop I think he was at. So I'm not familiar with where he's at. And then obviously, the Packers have Billy Turner and Darius Shepard as well. And Ross actually writes for Bison Report. He's like the owner of that. So Ross is really the big NDSU guy. It just so happens that Ross and I actually both grew up in North Dakota, which is wild that that Twitter can kind of bring people together. I never met Ross when I was living in North Dakota, but pretty crazy that how it can bring people together and such.
So, real quick, just give us some of your background a little bit. Obviously, I mentioned that you're with Packer Report now. You got the game preview that's coming out tomorrow, which we'll go over here in a little bit. But just kind of give us some of your insight. How did you become a Packers fan? How did you get into this Packers media world? And you actually, if I remember correctly, do some stuff with the Kansas City Chiefs as well.
Yeah. So I live in Kansas City now. My college roommate actually became like a big, draft writer for Arrowhead Pride, and it was something that we always enjoyed together. So he kind of brought me along there. In the last couple of years, we've been able to have a podcast with Arrowhead Pride, specifically talking about the NFL draft. How I became a Packers fan is interesting because growing up in North Dakota, you're basically either a Vikings fan or a Packers fan. That's kind of the territory. The first game I ever remember watching was the 1996 Super Bowl game, and honest to goodness, my first Packers memory is Aaron Rodgers running off the field with his helmet off, looking really happy, looking exciting. He just threw the touchdown pass to Andre Rison, and I just remember thinking, like as a kid, I'm like 7 years old, like that guy's awesome. Like I want to watch more of that guy, and so I did, and so that kind of grew into becoming a fan, and then moving to Kansas City, having kind of my first real exposure is through Arrowhead Pride, but then and reaching out to Andy when Pack-A-Day started, and then getting partnered up with Ross, and kind of the rest is history. And here we are, and things are kind of blowing up, and it's been a ton of fun. It's been a really fun ride, and I can't wait to see what comes of all this.
Yeah, we got some cool stuff going on at Packer Report. So Jake is just like me from the standpoint of my first memory is also Brett Favre running around with his helmet off over his head in the Super Bowl. So we're right around the same age there, and we'll keep you guys posted on some of the cool stuff going on at Packer Report. But I can't tell you just yet because then Ross might drive here and punch me himself. So Ross Uglum, obviously our publisher, who Jake mentioned, and he's given us an opportunity, and we're grateful for that. Same with Andy Herman. I think actually, Jake, this is the first time that we've synced up on anything. Obviously, I've seen your name, I've listened to your
Yeah.
podcasts, I've read your work, but I don't think we've ever done anything together, even by happenstance. So
Yeah, which is a shame. I mean, we got three Jacobs on the staff, so there's
yeah,
a little bit of a rivalry there, anyways. But I feel if we combine our powers, my goodness, man, the sky's the limit.
yeah, Jacob Ogden I made fun of earlier today for the size of his glasses. They're about this big, so I like to do that with him as much as I can. But you've got a wedding to go to today. Let's get and dive right in right here. The first big bit of news that we have from Packers land today was that Geronimo Allison was upgraded from doubtful to questionable. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to play, but the last time the Packers did that was 2 weeks ago with Kevin King, and he did play. Allison's situation a little more tricky just because it's a concussion and there's some hurdles that he has to clear that he wouldn't have to with a quote unquote normal injury. So that's up in the air. So is Marquez Valdez Scantling. tell me a little bit, Jake. What do you have? I mean, confidence level wise, Alan Lazard obviously had a big night, tough night for Darius Shepard, and kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum there for the young guys. Not a lot in terms of proven wide receiver going into this game tomorrow against Oakland. What's your confidence level if both of those guys are able to go versus not able to go?
Well, it's always funny because I was sitting down writing my preview as that news came through, and I had just gotten done talking about the three young guys, kind of the young triplets, if you will, of the Packers. And if Geronimo and MVS can go, that's great. I think Geronimo just for a security blanket type situation, but MVS is really the type of guy that I think they would really miss him if he can't go. Talking about watching the Chiefs Oakland game, Oakland really wants to sit on these short routes. They want you to, they almost dare you to beat them deep. And obviously MVS is your best bet to be able to do that. He's becoming one of the best young deep threats in the National Football League. So he's a guy that I would put more stock into him being able to play over Geronimo, just because Geronimo's had the struggles and we're all familiar with that. But one of these three guys, these triplets that I mentioned earlier, one of them is going to have to step up. And I'm talking about Alan Lazard. I'm talking about Darius Shepard. I'm talking about Jake Kummerow. These three guys, it seems like every single week someone new kind of pops up and becomes the guy that kind of takes on the role of the go-to guy in that offense. 2 weeks ago, it was Aaron Jones. Last week, it was Jamal Williams and Alan Lazard. And this week, you're kind of looking at one of those three guys and saying, which one of you three are going to step up and hopefully contribute to, this Packers offense being able to move the ball through the air. And, three of them have completely different storylines coming from last week. You got Alan Lazard, who's the toast of the town right now. Everybody wants Alan Lazard to kind of continue to his rise up the receiver depth chart, and he has a chance to do that. He's kind of, I think, going to get the first opportunity to, even if MVS and Geronimo are healthy, I think he'll be the third kind of guy on the depth chart, maybe even the second over Geronimo. So he's got to really prove that he can do it again. And I think Coach LaFleur even said that, anybody can do it once. It's can you do it twice? And so we're looking for Lazard to do it again. Now, Darius Shepard, on the other hand, is completely different. He's a guy that, shared the spotlight in training camp as someone that was, kind of an unheard of guy that really rose out of nowhere. We know the story. He was undrafted, tryout guy, made the team, and played so well that they got rid of Trevor Davis, who just so happens to be on the Oakland Raiders right now and probably will be their number one receiver this week, which is crazy to think about. But he played so well in early season and training camp that, he earned that role. And last week was about as disastrous as you could have imagined for any young player. To the point where, Jake, I think, honestly, a lot of people were questioning, and it wasn't out of line to wonder if he was even going to be on the team this week. He really cost the Packers in that last game with the muff punt and then the drop ball, whatever that was at the goal line. I think Rodgers, took blame for that one, which is crazy. Rodgers taking blame for something that never happens.
No,
right?
Bad teammate, bad leader, would never stick up for his receivers like that.
Really weird. That wasn't on any national outlets. Weird. But so that happened. So you're looking at Darius Shepard and saying, hey, this is kind of a make or break week for him. If you go out and do that again, I just don't think you can recover from that. If he even if he comes out and has just a kind of run of the mill game, I think that's fine. But you're looking for someone that Matt LaFleur immediately backed. Devontae Adams immediately backed him. Like, they believe in this guy. So is he someone that can come out and perform this week? And not to put the horse ahead of the cart or whatever that phrase is, but LaMarcus Joyner has been terrible. So, Darius Shepard is the Packers' best slot option. So if there is a game for him to come out and make things right, this would be a good week for that to happen for obvious reasons. And then the third guy is someone that doesn't really need an introduction, but Jake Kummerow. You want to talk about media darlings. Jake Kummerow is that guy. Last week, he played 65 out of the Packers' 74 offensive snaps, and that netted him 2 catches for 17 yards on 3 targets. Underwhelming. Nothing that says he can't, move forward and play better in the future, because that really was his first extended look. but this guy's 27 years old. He's not a freak athlete. He is what he is. So that's a guy that's on your roster that's not playing special teams. He's there to be a wide receiver. He's there to be there in situations like this where you need a receiver to step up and just be able to play good football. And he didn't play bad last week, but he didn't play good. It was a very forgettable performance. So here's another guy that people are waiting. He's got plenty of fans in Green Bay and across the country that are waiting for him to kind of have his breakout game. And it's kind of getting to that point where is it going to happen? So this would be a great week for him as well. So that's, for as far as my storylines and my matchups for this game, that's really where I think the most compelling stories is in that receiver group, just because they all are coming from such a different kind of last week. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jacob.
Yeah, Jake Kumaro, I think, is, the cautionary tale I've kept trying to give is that he's 27 years old, undrafted rookie, and hasn't scratched a regular season roster. I know he's had some nice moments. I know he's from Wisconsin. Whether or not that gives the Green Bay beat some inherent bias towards him, I can't say. But it is a nice story, and he's somebody who's easy to root for, obviously, because of that story that comes with. It's very similar to Darius Shepard, and these undrafted guys, they're easy to root for. The problem that they've had is lack of consistency. Like you mentioned, Matt LaFleur saying anybody can do it once. Can you do it consistently week in and week out? And that really is a question with the receiving core that's playing this week from the top of the depth chart all the way down, because Marquez Valdez-Scantling even, he has some moments, some big plays, but there's plenty of games you see him, one catch, 34 yards, no touchdowns, stuff like that. And for the Packers, I think, to make a run in the postseason this year, they're going to have to find some other consistent, reliable targets. We'll see if newcomer Ryan Grant, not to be confused with the former running back, is able to do something like that. I'll be curious how many snaps he gets tomorrow, if any. But I know that there are reports out. Benjamin Albright reported that the Packers inquired on Emmanuel Sanders. There's some whispers that they're going after Mohamed Sanu. And maybe even potentially there's kind of an unconfirmed rumor about Austin Hooper that would be an excellent addition to the tight end room. But right now, if the playoffs were to start tomorrow, I don't know if the Packers have enough consistent receiving options, even with Devontae Adams in the lineup. So that's something tomorrow. Oh, man, I think that you mentioned the way the Raiders want to play the game, and that's kind of the way the Packers have to play the game. Especially if MVS can't go, then there's nobody. You mentioned those guys. Lazard, not a burner. Darius Shepard, not a deep threat. Jake Kumaro, same thing. These are all guys that are going to beat you in the short, intermediate routes, and that's the way the Raiders want to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a game that, I picked Green Bay to win, and I picked them to win 20-10. And I don't know how they score points. Now, granted, when I did make that 20-point pick, I didn't know that the likelihood of Allison and Valdez-Scantling to play. But even then, I think that this is a game that Green Bay is going to have to win on defense. And speaking of the defense, let's go to that side of the ball because, it's clear that's the strength of this team. The offense has had its moments, but it's clearly an inconsistent group at this point. And we always kind of thought that was going to be the way with them installing a new system, so many young, unproven players, all of that stuff. The Raiders are starting a backup right tackle tomorrow, more likely than not, unless something changes from the entire week and Trent Brown is able to play. Working through some stuff, some legal stuff and some injury stuff, so we don't want to get too far into that stuff. But Preston and Zadarius Smith, those are guys who they've changed really everything about this Packers defense. I feel like, last year, if you and I are having this conversation, we're talking about like hoping for a vintage performance from Clay Matthews or a vintage performance from Nick Perry and trying to talk ourselves into that. Now, we don't really have to do that because Preston and Zadarius Smith have brought it every single week. I know they had some issues. They didn't have any sacks against the Eagles, but even then, Zadarius had a couple quarterback hits. Preston Smith was smelling blood with Carson Wentz. They just weren't able to get home, and the Eagles were able to keep them so off-balanced that they weren't able to pin their ears back and rush the passer quite like they may have wanted to. So with that in mind, Derek Carr gets the ball out of his hands faster than any quarterback in the NFL at this point. I call him a dink and dunk passer. My opinion of Derek Carr is pretty low. I think that if the Packers are able to stop the run, that Derek Carr won't be able to beat them. So what are some of your thoughts on how can you get pressure on Derek Carr when he gets the ball out of his hands within 3 seconds or less all the time.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Derek Carr is getting the ball out in 2.41 seconds, which is tied for fourth best in the league. And but when you're that high, it's all close. It's everyone's about the same, and it's tough because what they do a really good job of is gaining yards on first down. And they've done an excellent job of making it second and short, third and short. And then that allows them to kind of dink and dunk. They don't have a lot of options on the outside. Like I mentioned earlier, Trevor Davis is legitimately probably going to be their number one receiver.
Yeah, tomorrow. No Tyrell Williams tomorrow.
But, they got Darren Waller is a good player. He just signed an extension. He's not the same type of tight end that the Packers have faced. Your TJ Hawkinsons, your Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert's in the fact that those guys block and receive. Darren Waller is basically a receiver. I mean, let's call it what it is. But he's a guy they're going to have to account for. And like I said, Derek Carr, and you mentioned, he gets the ball out really quick. And they can do that because they are in such third and favorable positions. So if the Packers can come out tomorrow and get them in some third and longs, that's going to be the straw that stirs the drink. And that's kind of how it's been all year. So the question is, can they do it? And this is very similar to how they played the Cowboys in the fact that the Cowboys are kind of the same way. They're efficient on first down. They let Dak kind of dink and dunk, take some shots. And honestly, I think Dak is a better quarterback than Derek Carr, but that's beside the point. Preston Smith is an interesting fact, and I think the Packers actually tweeted this yesterday, but Preston Smith is averaging 2.6 seconds every sack. That's quick. Yes. It's very quick. So and you saw that last week when he's able to time up the snap and basically, he's there in the quarterback's, lap immediately. So it's going to need to be that. That's going to need to be what happens, because if you can get Derek Carr to be uncomfortable, and it's not a mistake that they want him to get the ball out of his hands quickly. They want him to know where he's going with the ball, and they want him to go there immediately. So two things that can happen with that. One is if, Trent Brown doesn't play, they got David Sharp in there, who is he struggles. He's not great. The Smith brothers have absolutely feasted on backup or inferior talent this year. I wouldn't expect it to be any different this week. But the second thing is, if you can get not a sack, but even pressure in under 3 seconds, that means you got someone around Derek Carr. You got him around his feet. You got people in his face. The thing that happens with this is I would very much expect the Packers to play a lot more man tomorrow and to kind of sit on those short routes. And what happens with that is if you can get some pressure on Derek Carr, he is the type of quarterback that will give you opportunities to take the ball away. And you marry that with this dink and dunk type offense. I just said tomorrow I'm going out on a limb and saying I think there's a very good chance tomorrow that we see a Packers pick six if they can get pressure on. Because what happens with those short passes, it's an opportunity for the defense to jump it. It's an opportunity for them to jump it and go the other way. So I think as far as their offense, that there's no secret. That's what they're going to try to do tomorrow. They're going to try to run the ball. They're going to try to run it early and often, make third and short, third and manageable, and let Derek Carr, throw a 7-yard pass and move the chains. They don't scare me over the top at all. I'd be very willing to eat crow on this because I don't think I'll have to. I would bet that Derek Carr will not complete a pass over 30 yards in the air tomorrow. I just don't see that happening. Not against this Packers secondary. Not against just with how quick they've wanted to get the ball out as well. So I think that's basically that's what the Packers game plan is going to have to be. It's simple. If you can stop the run on early downs, if you can get Derek Carr in third and long, he's going to give you some opportunities to either take a sack or take the ball away.
Yeah, some interesting stuff there, because if there has been one bugaboo against Mike Pettine's defense this year, it has been the propensity to give up that big play. So with Derek Carr's unwillingness, inability, John Gruden putting training wheels on him, whatever it is, it's a good matchup for the Packers. And as soon as you said those short routes and everything like that, my first thought was pick six potential. And with the Packers having a mash unit on offense potentially, that might be points that it's those hidden points, that complementary football that the Packers have done so well with this year that they may need that to score some points. Mm-hmm. Let's get to one final point before we sign off here. Something I wrote today was about Dean Lowry and kind of how his play, coincidentally or not, has kind of stirred the drink in terms of their run defense this year and how they've been able to control the running game. I know the Broncos had a lot of attempts and their yards per carry was low, but they were able to do enough with running the ball to kind of keep their offense in some favorable situations. The two games that I pointed out were Chicago, where the Bears abandoned their running game. Some of that was because it was Matt Nagy being arrogant, which he has a propensity to do. Some of it was because the Packers were able to control the running game, and I don't think that was talked about enough after that first game. And the other one was this past week against the Lions, where they held the Lions to their lowest rushing total of the season. And Dean Lowry, coincidentally, played his two best games in those two games. When he played poorly, Philadelphia, Dallas to some degree. Dallas, they controlled the running game really because they were up by 30 points. So that's one way to do it, but not the way that is going to be a little sustainable. The Vikings, he didn't play that well, and Dalvin Cook really had a very nice game that day. But what are your thoughts? Lowry got a big extension this offseason. He's from my hometown. I watched him play in high school, so I always joke that he's Rockford, Illinois' finest. But what are your thoughts on the way Lowry has played, and is this something he can sustain tomorrow? Because the Raiders, I mean, Richie Incognito, say what you will, he's a bad person. I think that's been pretty well established by this point. But he's in the NFL because he's a good player, and he's somebody that has done some good things for the Raiders this year and really played really well. He had a stupid penalty against the Bears, but, I mean, that's kind of what you get with a guy like that, I guess. But otherwise, really did a good job at controlling the line of scrimmage against a Bears defense that is one of the best, if not the best, in football. So what are your thoughts on, I mean, Kenny Clark is a given. We know he's going to play well for the most part, although he's kind of dealing with some injuries, and maybe that's hurt his effectiveness here recently. But what are your thoughts on Lowry's ability to maybe sustain and build off of his performance on Monday night?
Yeah, and Oakland's getting back Gabe Jackson as well tomorrow, who hasn't played this year. So he's another offensive guard he's a presence. But I think, Dean Lowry, I think Mike Pettin actually kind of gave him a compliment at the same time as calling him out. If, they talked about how he has done a much better job of kind of playing that gap sound type defense where he's not guessing. He's basically just doing his job. And, he's two gapping at times where he's clogging things up, and he's doing a much better job of that. So I think we've seen in the past from Dean Lowry that he can be a very effective run defender, but it just is going to take basically him doing what he's supposed to do. So I think we've seen that the last couple of weeks. He was awesome last week against Detroit. I think, you want to give him probably one of the game balls on defense just because of how well he had like 3 or 4 tackles, I think, within the 1 yard line.
Correct.
So I think, he's a guy, I think he can continue to play like that. And I think if they have any chance at stopping the run tomorrow, he's going to have to. So it'll be interesting to see, if he can, stack success, and he can do that again next week. And I think, like I said, we've seen him do it in the past. And I think some of those games earlier in this year were kind of an anomaly for him because I really do have a lot of respect for him as a run defender. So I think he can absolutely be a factor in this game tomorrow. And I think, if the Packers are going to try to come out of this game with a win, he's going to need to be.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. So, Jake, you have, real quick, give me your score prediction. I know that I know it, but the rest of the world doesn't. So, Green Bay wins tomorrow?
I don't remember. What was it? Let me look it up real quick. I think it was like 27-17 or something like that.
Yeah, it was in that range.
But game predictions are fun. I think the Packers win tomorrow, and I think they win by, I think I had them over 9 points. And the reason I think that is basically just because I think they're going to be able to move the ball on offense. Here we go, 28-17. So I was close. And I basically just kind of talked about the things we talked about. He's getting the ball out quick. They're effective on first downs, but I think if the Packers can stop them, I think they can do some things on offense, especially now with MVS and Geronimo potentially playing. I just think, I'm really starting to buy in to Matt LaFleur and what he's able to do with this offense, just because it seems like every week, there's just a new guy, just someone else that no one really expected to have a big game, and they do. So I think that happens again this week. I said last week I had a feeling about Danny Vitale, and I still do. It didn't happen last week. Maybe I was a week early, but I think he's a guy that can really provide something in the run game and the passing game. So I'm kind of waiting for his breakout game. It might not ever happen, but Danny Vitale is my sleeper of the week, if you will.
I have a hunch that if that happens, it'll be against San Francisco just because the troll job there is potentially tremendous. So we'll
That's
see.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's potentially a showdown of two titans there in the NFC. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how that goes. But we both like Green Bay to win. I mentioned 20-10. I'm Jacob Westendorf, Packer Report, Pulse of the Pack, Pack a Day. You pretty much name it as far as the Packers go. I'm pretty much involved with all of it. Jake Morley, the same way. Tell us where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Morley. Give that a follow. We try to have some fun. So,
alrighty, that's the way that we're going to do it for tonight. So we both like Green Bay to win. Thank you guys for joining. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and of course, go Pack, go.